Time now for the Sunday Talk, where we tap into the debate of the week. When Donald Trump fired the man in charge of investigating him, dire accusations quickly followed. On CNN, presidential historian Douglas Brinkley said, quote, "Donald Trump just behaved like a tyrant. We've heard whispers of this before when Trump installed family members in influential positions or demonized the press. Now, the sacking of FBI Director James Comey has ramped up the tyranny talk. Is Donald Trump pulling off a bloodless coup, or are his critics prepared to believe anything?" I'm joined by our panelists. Tasha Keridan is a talk radio host in Toronto and a columnist with iPolitics. Stephen Marsh is an author and a columnist with Esquire magazine. And Lincoln Blades joins us tonight. He's a journalist who writes about U.S. politics for Teen Vogue and Rolling Stone. So welcome, Lincoln. I'll come to you in just a moment. But Stephen, I'm going to start with you. Is Trump a tyrant, or should people chill out a bit?
I think he's basically the dictionary definition of tyrant. Tyrant is a very old word, but it's actually very appropriate because, to me, the most important feature of democracy as it's developed from Greece on has been equality under the law, which means that no one is above the law. No one is above the application of the law. And when you have the person in power firing the people who are trying to apply the law to him, that's the dictionary definition of tyranny.
What do you think? Tyrant?
I don't think that he's a tyrant, and I don't think that we should chill out. When I say I don't think he's a tyrant, I don't believe that, like when I think of the word tyrant, I think of absolute power. And I don't think that he necessarily defines someone who is after absolute power in the sense of he wants to control and centralize it within himself. He's the type of man that has a lot, that outsources a lot of his worldview to Steve Bannon, right. Also as well to Pence, who he wants to do a lot of the governing. That's why I don't see him as a tyrant, but we should not under any means chill out.
Tasha?
I think he is a tyrannical CEO, and I use that word simply because he comes from a very, obviously, a business background. And I think that Trump's approach to governing is exactly to ignore the whole issue of the rule of law, ignore the concept of democracy. He doesn't have any grounding in that.
So he's an oligarch?
Yes, he would be like an oligarch. He behaves in a way that he used to become famous. The phrase "you're fired" made him famous in television, and also that's how he ran his company. If you were on his side, you were on his side. If you weren't loyal to him, you were out. So he's unfortunately brought those things to bear, but I don't think he has necessarily a grand design for the government or a policy background that he's trying to bring to bear as a tyrant. Not that that's good, but it's a distinction, I would say.
So not a strategic genius, then, Lincoln?
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you think that he wants to be president of the United States?
You know, I've actually heard that he didn't. I've actually heard from people who knew him in the campaign, who'd known him before the campaign, who said he came in there to make a point, to get publicity for his businesses, to be someone who shook things up, but didn't actually think it would go the distance.
So what difference does that make?
I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that.
Because to me, if you're a tyrant and you want absolute power, then shouldn't you want to be in the position that gives you absolute power?
But I don't think his motives...
An interview recently came out where he said, "I didn't think this president of the United States job would be harder than the last job I had, which was being a reality TV star." Right. He was lamenting the fact that he was president of the United States. Mm-hmm. That's not a feature of a tyrant. That's a feature of someone who's in over his head.
Look, trying to figure out Trump's motives is just not possible. I mean, it's like trying to get the bottom eel out of a barrel of eels. Like,
why do you say that, though?
Well, because it's unfathomable. It's like it's someone with narcissistic personality disorder, someone with a borderline personality disorder.
Well, we don't know that.
But you're right. I'm sorry, but you don't know. But it doesn't matter. His motives don't matter, because the thing is,
do you not think he's transparent?
No, I definitely think he's not transparent. I think he contains great depths. But I think the point is here.
Are you being?
I'm being serious, for sure.
Okay.
I think the absolute thing here is that his motives don't matter. It's the fact that what he's done to the system of government is that Sally Yates went after him, so he fired her. Preet Bharara went after him, so he fired him.
Which is exactly what you would do if you were in a company and you didn't like people who were under you, who were saying things you didn't like to listen to. This is Trump also. He surrounds himself with yes men or family, people who will listen to him and who will also agree with him all the time. And that is, and again, it's a failing of leadership, but it's
so,
also
Lincoln,
something
you said that he's not a tyrant necessarily, but you're concerned. What are you concerned about?
I'm really concerned about the fact that I just don't think that he's intellectually or motivated to do this job. Because you're the leader of the free world. And it's a position that when you come into, you're coming into it with the knowledge of, I want to be in here for 8 years. And when I look at him, if I had to make a comparison to who Trump is, and I was going to use Game of Thrones for an example. So let's just say the real world was Westeros. He's not a Stark, he's not a Targaryen, and if he was the Lannisters, he would be Joffrey Lannister. He is not interested, he's interested in vengefulness, he's interested in sort of getting the people who attack him. That's why he goes on his Twitter. People can look on his Twitter, and you can look at Fox News, and you can actually align who he's going to attack based on who he is seeing at a specific time in the morning. That to me doesn't ring true of a tyrant. That rings true of someone who's just vengeful.
And he also
angry.
lists the last person to give him advice is often the person who will determine his policy or the last thing he sees. And we saw that, for example, in terms of Syria. And he decided, based on a photograph and an emotional response, to go forward with bombing when he had said he would not do that.
So, Tasha, in the past, you've argued that there are lots of checks and balances in the American system, that, you know, whatever he might want to accomplish, he can't necessarily. Do you still believe that?
I believe there are. I think obviously what he's done with Comey is it's wrong. It is compromising that system. But at the same time, there are other checks and balances. There is Congress. There is also the fact that he does not command any kind of military force, and that is a distinction I would make also in terms of tyranny. Traditionally, dictators who have had coups, bloody coups usually, have commanded military force to do it. He does not have brown shirts. He does not have people, organized military, to back up anything. In that sense, it is an important distinction to make.
He's the commander-in-chief.
Do you think the Army would follow Donald Trump?
He is the commander-in-chief of the greatest military force the world has ever known. And the
And
fact
do you
that
think
he
they
is
would
willing,
all line up behind him to do his bidding on X, Y, Z? Do you think they would?
He is the commander-in-chief. He is absolutely able. If he wants to nuke anyone this afternoon, he will. He can. No one can stop him.
I think that the enemy of justice is goodwill to your job, is keeping your job. So I don't think it's necessarily about him commanding a force who's going to be so evil and against him. I think what it is about commanding people as the president of the United States. And he'll be able to say, you know what, I am the president of the United States. And everyone will say, okay, well, he's the commander-in-chief. And when his orders roll down, they keep rolling down to people who are going to actually go out there and follow their job. I think that's what the scary thing is.
He fires anyone who shows the slightest resistance to him. The Republican Party, who is in power, has shown exactly zero spine. I see absolutely no evidence that the so-called checks and balances are in play.
There's an
here.
impeachment process. There's an impeachment
Alan
process that
Rickman,
could be followed through.
The historian who correctly predicted every presidential win since 1984 is now predicting he will be impeached.
Exactly.
And says the Comey situation, the firing, is enough to get him impeached. But that would require Republicans to get on side. He's saying perhaps that, but do you see that happening? Do you see Republicans turning on Trump? What would it take?
So for U.S. politicians, and I interview a lot of Congress people, and their biggest fear is being primaried. They don't want to lose their jobs. So it's not about the political apparatus is dependent on their state. It's dependent on their district. So at the end of the day, if the political mood amongst the people does not change, then the politicians themselves aren't going to change. How many politicians have we seen step out fervently against Trump and then ended up having to support him? People like Ted Cruz.
Everyone but John McCain.
John McCain. I was gonna
Nikki
say.
Haley came out strong against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And look at the job that she has now, right?
Right.
So it's like this idea that you're going to come out against Trump, it is to come out against some of the most fervent parts of your base.
then?
No, I don't. And I think we're at the point where we have to ask if the Republican Party ever really was any different than this. Like, I mean, now this is the party of McCarthy and Nixon and Trump, right? And these are people who have very little respect for democratic norms or the rule of law when it is in conflict with their own power. And I take your point that these people have jobs and they're trying to keep their jobs. But I mean, surely at some point, the freedom of your country has to stand. It has to come before your job.
There's no historical precedent of that.
You know what? You're
I
right. There isn't, and it's appalling. And that's why what we're seeing here is like actually probably the most important political event.
But
of our lifetimes.
I think as important as this event is, I don't think this is going to end up being as politically detrimental as people think it would.
Alan
For
Lichtman
any
was
other-
saying that this is worse than Watergate. It's worse than the firing of the special prosecutor.
I agree with that, and I think these times are different. We live in a time of bipartisan patriotism. And
Yeah, that's
the
right.
problem.
Tasha, you were
Party
trying to
comes
get in
before
here?
I was going to simply say, I don't think the Republican Party made Trump. In fact, the Republican Party feared the election of Trump. The Republican Party wanted to do everything it could to prevent it. The people that got Trump in were an electorate that felt disenfranchised, dissatisfied, and unrepresented by any political party. And if you saw at the convention, you didn't see the words liberty and those kinds of things appearing in Trump's speeches. You saw the party
So if it's the people and not the
Trump.
party, then
Yes.
when do the people ever change their mind? Or
This
they
is
don't?
the issue of the tyrant. If the tyrant can appeal to that, and I agree, this is the danger. This is one of the dangers of tyranny, is that, and this you've seen this throughout history, appealing to that disenfranchised people and leading that people. And if he can keep connecting with them, he can maintain what he's doing. But
Last quick word to Stephen, and then Lincoln.
that may not happen.
Supposedly, the American Constitution is the greatest instrument ever devised for moderating tyrannical mob rule with institutions.
It's the beacon on the hill.
And so Trump has just taken an axe and gutted that. I mean, he has just said,
I would say he's gutted. He struck a blow with it. It is not dead, Stephen. That's hyperbolic.
if you're a policeman and you come after, if you're a policeman and you come after the president, you can just be fired. This is a violation of a democratic norm that has gone back in Anglo-American tradition to 1215. I mean, it is as old as the system itself.
The political change that you'll see in America is when the white populace decides that they've been affected in other ways. And that's going to be the change. You're starting to see people in other countries who are saying, oh my God, or sorry, in other counties where they voted for Trump, they're starting to say, oh my gosh, my health care is going to be affected.
Exactly.
And now you're starting to see that tide turn.
Very interesting. We'll see what happens. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks,
Thank you.
Lincoln.
No problem.